Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a really profound section of the Mahabharata today, specifically section 209. What we're looking at is this incredible, mind-expanding conversation between a Brahmana and a virtuous fowler. And honestly, what makes this text so captivating is how seamlessly it bridges the gap between our everyday ground-level human flaws and, well, the ultimate incomprehensible scale of the entire cosmos. It's literally a journey from the micro to the macro.
We're using the fowler's wisdom as our roadmap today. We'll be quickly covering the slippery slope of desire, the anatomy of the hypocrite, the virtuous mindset, the Brahmanic universe, and finally, the 17 incomprehensible qualities. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The slippery slope of desire.
So, the trap of our most basic human desires actually doesn't start with something inherently evil. It starts with something we generally consider to be pretty great, the acquisition of knowledge. But the fowler outlines this terrifying downward spiral. Once that knowledge is acquired, a shift happens. People start indulging in their passions and desires, laboring over these massive tasks just to chase fleeting pleasures of, say, beauty or flavor. And that indulgence? It leads right to step 3, fondness. But it doesn't stop there. Fondness eventually sours into envy. Envy hardens into avarice, or extreme greed. And finally, being totally overcome by this avarice and envy, a person's intellect is completely derailed from righteousness. They plummet into the total extinction of spiritual light. It's wild to think about, right? A chain reaction where the initial pursuit of knowing something can actually lead to the darkest spiritual ignorance if you don't keep it in check.
Moving on to Section 2. Anatomy of the hypocrite.
So, once that spiritual light goes out, how exactly does the mind operate in the dark? According to the fowler, when a person's intellect is no longer guided by righteousness, they start practicing what he calls the very mockery of virtue. They're basically just faking it, completely content to acquire wealth by dishonorable means. But here is the most fascinating part. When confronted by wise friends who try to, talk some sense into them, the hypocrite gives specious answers. The text explicitly states these answers are neither sound nor convincing. I mean, they hit the nail on the head here. It perfectly describes the timeless phenomenon of cognitive dissonance, just making up flimsy excuses to justify a reality where their intellect has become utterly enamored with evil ways.
And this brilliantly illustrates the fowler's concept of the threefold sin. When someone is addicted to these wicked ways, all their good qualities just die out. The hypocrisy isn't merely some surface-level act, it is a complete corruption. As the text says, they commit sin in thought, in word, as also in action. It shows how this mockery of virtue infects literally every single layer of a person's existence. And because of that, they naturally start cultivating friendships with people of a similarly wicked character, which leads to suffering and misery not just in this world, but in the next.
Which brings us to Section 3. The virtuous mindset.
If the hypocrite represents that downward spiral we just talked about, what does the upward climb look like? How do we escape the trap? Well, we have a really sharp contrast here. While the hypocrite is trapped in misery and surrounded by toxic friends, the virtuous man uses spiritual insight. He actually has the clarity to discriminate between true happiness and true misery. Instead of giving those specious, fake answers to wise men, he gives respectful attention to men of virtue. And by actively practicing virtues, his mind naturally becomes inclined to righteousness. It's a highly conscious, insightful pivot straight away from the snare of avarice and envy.
All right, Section 4, the Brahmanic universe.
Now that we've established the practical morality of the mind on a micro level, we are zooming all the way out to the macro, the unconquerable cosmos. The Brahmana listening to the fowler is so blown away by what he's hearing that he calls him a great rishi and basically begs to learn this deeper philosophy. So the text defines Brahma in this magnificent, all-encompassing way. It is the whole universe, unconquerable everywhere and abounding in great elements. The fowler makes it explicitly clear here, there is absolutely nothing higher than this. It represents the peak of cosmic existence, the grand container of all reality.
To help us make sense of this immense cosmos, the fowler systematically categorizes the physical universe. He breaks it all down into the 5 great elements: earth, air, water, fire, and sky. But he doesn't stop there. He directly links these great elements to their specific sensory properties or characteristics: form, odor, sound, touch, and taste. The text notes that these properties are all correlated to each other. It's an incredibly structured way to view reality, isn't it? It binds the massive physical elements of the universe directly to the everyday ways in which our human bodies perceive them.
And finally, Section 5, the 17 incomprehensible qualities.
We've categorized the physical elements, so now we reach the absolute, deepest, most complex layer of human consciousness. The text identifies a massive, specific number of elements that collectively make up what the Fowler calls the unknown or incomprehensible qualities of existence. 17. 17 qualities. It's a highly specific number that builds a complete framework of the self and its moral universe.
Let's actually break down these 17 qualities because they trace a pretty remarkable evolutionary ladder of existence. First off, we have consciousness, which the text calls the mind. The seventh quality in this grand order, intelligence, which is then immediately followed by egoism. After egoism, we have the five senses, bringing our count way up. Then comes the soul itself. And finally, capping off the whole shebang, these 17 incomprehensible qualities are the fundamental moral qualities: sattva, rajas, and tamas. This evolutionary ladder is absolutely crucial. Why? Because it shows how this ancient text maps everything, from basic sensory input all the way up to the soul and right into the fundamental moral fabric of the universe itself. It's a completely holistic view of what makes up our unseen reality.
The Fowler ends this profound cosmic explanation to the Brahmana with a beautifully simple question. I have described all this to thee, what else dost thou wish to know? It just leaves us with this tremendous sense of scale, doesn't it? I mean, we started with the petty, everyday avarice of the human mind, and those specious answers we give to cover up our flaws. We learned how to correct that downward spiral through spiritual insight, and then we journeyed all the way out to the unconquerable universe of Brahma, mapping the 5 great elements and the 17 incomprehensible qualities of the soul. So, after mapping the very depths of our minds and the absolute edges of the universe, what else is there left for us to discover? I highly encourage you to keep that question rattling around in your mind today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep seeking that spiritual insight.